Welcome to College Food Advice, Victor. I'm so happy you're joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me, Katie. Looking forward to our discussion.
Me too. You wrote a book called Welcome to College, Your Career Starts Now. So I'd like to start by talking a little bit about why it's important for students to recognize that their careers start the moment they enter the college experience.
Well, it certainly does work that way for the intelligent student, the one who's on top of it. So what I've tried to do is I had 30-year career in the chemical industry, international business, and I learned a lot about the graduates from college that were coming to work for us and how prepared they were. And then after I finished my career in the chemical industry, I went to teach at a liberal arts college for 13 years. I taught business courses, international business, marketing, management, that type of thing. So I had a chance to see firsthand how the students were preparing for their careers while they were in college, what kind of advice they were getting, and what gaps I thought there existed in the process. So I've been writing for a number of years, mostly commentary, but I thought I'd write a book of advice really to the college students that's based upon not only my experience teaching, but also my experience in the business world. So I wrote the book, Welcome to College, Your Career Starts Now, because one thing I've realized as students grow up, they're K through 12, they're in the high school years, they're at home, it's kind of controlled. And then there's a tendency to say, okay, now that's done, now you're going to go to college for 4 years. And that's this little section. And then after that, you're going to go get a job, and that's the third section. And what I am trying to stress is that the 4 college years are not a parentheses in your life. They're really the on-ramp to what comes next. So when you're in college, when you're in high school, let me back up, you take a lot of courses that everybody takes. I mean, the degrees of advancement might be a little bit different, but basically in high school, they're teaching you the things you broadly need to know. Math and science and history and geography and civics and writing and English composition, that type of thing. When you get to college, it changes. Now you're taking coursework. Some of it is general, like in the core curriculum. They'll require you to take a math course, a science course, etc. But the core curriculum is only a piece of the college experience. The rest of it is really all in the major and the electives that support the major. So what happens is you have to really look at college as the beginning of your career, the on-ramp, the launching pad. And too many students wait until senior year and then come in with what I call senior year shock. Oh my God, it's here and I'm going to graduate in a few months. Now what do I do? And what we want to avoid is having that senior year shock, believe me. So I think what I'd like to do, if it's okay, is talk about how students, in my opinion, can use their college years in 2 ways. One is to think about how to choose a major, a career track, how to think about organizations you might want to work for, how to go on from there and interview for those accounts and whatnot. And basically choose a career that makes sense, and then use your majors, your electives, and everything else to prepare for that. The second area, and we can come back to this, are all the skill sets, regardless of major, regardless of career. Students need to develop certain skill sets that are useful not only in college, but beyond. And there's things like how to dress, how to act, how to speak, how to get back to people, how not to procrastinate, how to be on time, just a lot of things that they're going to find very important after graduation as well. So if you'd like, we could kind of talk about the first track and then the second, if that's okay?
Yeah, that's totally in alignment with my plan. I do want to talk a little bit after that as well about maybe some mistakes that you are seeing, things that
Right.
really stood out that inspired you to have that aha that, oh, we need to have a conversation with the students. But let's start there first with the key things that students need to be doing to prepare for their career. And then I like that, and we can kind of pivot from the hard strategic things to the skills building things. So that sounds
Okay.
great.
Okay, so most colleges will tell a student, you've got 2 years to decide on what you want to major in. My opinion is you've got 1 year to decide what you want to major in. And it's not that hard a decision. you want to major in something that you're good at. And coming
Yay!
and coming into college, you know if you're good at math, or if you're good at science, or if you're good at art, or if you're good at writing. I mean, everybody's got their own skill set. And so I really encourage students, don't fool around with that decision. Kind of get that one under your belt.
Mhm.
Take the general courses they want you to take your first year. Usually colleges have like a smattering of required courses for your freshman experience, and that's fine. And while you're doing that, you think about what you were good in high school, what your high school guidance counselors advised you, what your parents advised you. Talk to the academic resources you have on campus, you know, the academic advisors. Talk to your faculty, talk with other students. And during that first year, think through, okay, I'm good at science, say. So I'm going to pick a major in science realm. So perhaps, and I'll use the example of chemistry, not just because I majored in chemistry, but I have an anecdote to share with you about a student chemistry major in a few minutes. So you decide, okay, I'm going to major in chemistry. I'm good at science. It's related to biology. I can go in different directions. And I'm going to start to focus my electives and my future coursework on that chemistry degree. And at this point, I advise the students, you have a certain number of free electives. You know, you have to take the core courses, so you take those. And actually in the core courses, you've got a lot of flexibility. You can take all sorts of history courses to satisfy that requirement, all sorts of art courses to satisfy that, language, etc. So you do get a broad background in a lot of the academic offerings. But then use these free electives. They're like golden nuggets. They're like golden coins in your pocket called free electives. And you don't want to scorch those too soon. You don't want to waste those. Keep them in your pocket. Get that major decided upon. Think a little bit more about what role in business or in an organization you want to play based on that major. And then when you're really getting your career thoughts put together, then you think about, okay, what electives that I could take in this college or university would fit into that and support that. So resist the urge to take jazz in America as an elective in your freshman year. You know, just hold on to that free elective. I mean, it's tempting, but hold it for another time. So I would get that major behind you, get that decided, and start moving forward. The next step you have to take, and this really happens in your second and third year, ideally, is to think about, okay, based on this chemistry major, say, what can I do? What can I do with this major? Well, there's a lot of opportunities. You could go on and get a PhD and go to work in chemical research, which a lot of people do. You could go into chemical sales, you know, selling industrial chemicals, where it's more business oriented, but selling chemicals. You could go into the pharmaceutical industry, either in a commercial or technical role. So you could teach chemistry in high school. You know, you could do any number of things that use the chemistry degree as a basis. So in that second and third year, you want to start to think about, well, what would I like to do with this degree? Am I go out very external, very outgoing person? Do I like meeting people? And maybe you want to go into sales, marketing, business development for a chemical company or a pharmaceutical company. Or you might say, no, I'm a little bit more of an introvert. I'm a little bit more data-driven, and maybe a laboratory type experience is the right one for you. So you think through that. You talk to people in the chemical industry or the pharmaceutical industry about what they do, why they selected it, and how they like it. This can be faculty members, adjunct faculty, and I really stress the adjunct faculty because they're working today in their field and coming on to teach a course. I would also stress your career services organization at the college. And career services is very frustrating because most students don't come to see them until their senior year. You want to start talking to them in your second year, I think. So, you know, there's a lot of, and then visiting speakers on campus is a very good way to get a sounding, give them your name, your number, exchange information, and start to build up a dialogue. So I think your second and third year, you really want to get to understand the options that can grow from your degree. And then at that time, you start to think about your work study experiences. And you think about how I can incorporate that into my choice of a major and my choice of a career. So, for example, if you are interested in going into the chemical industry in a sales or business development setting, you would like to go to work in the summers for a chemical company or a pharmaceutical company as an intern, a sales intern, a helper, and see what they do and see how it works out. You'll get to know them and they'll get to know you. And believe me, for 30 years in industry, the most important thing we do is hire smart people that are a good fit for our organization. So
Mhm.
they are looking hard at you. And if you like what you do and you make a good impression, you've got a real in, which makes it a lot easier for you. So the work study experience is important. And then I would also say study abroad. And I think about a third of the students maybe go abroad. Now with the coronavirus, that'll probably dampen a little bit. But and generally speaking, there's a certain number that do go abroad for a semester, usually in their junior year. And what I would suggest is if you're that far down the road, and I'll stick to my chemistry major, but it could be any major, obviously, you think about organizations that have global presence, and maybe you want to study in London, study abroad. So you look at the organizations that have offices in London or large bases of operations. You reach out to them, you tell them you're going to be in London for this semester. You'd like to come over, meet their people. From a visa standpoint, you can't really work there, but you sure can get over and introduce yourself and get to know them and get an understanding of what they do. And that kind of builds your resume looking ahead towards graduation.
Yeah.
And just one more thing.
Mhm.
Don't dread the language requirement. Do not dread it. Embrace it. Ich kann ein bisschen Deutsch sprechen. Ich habe 8 Jahre studieren. So I learned German. I learned it in high school. I kept it up in college. When I went into the chemical industry, I was in Germany all the time, and it was a real plus. So the other thing I would just on the academic side is stress that don't look for a college that you can get away with as little foreign language as possible. Take it, embrace it, and learn it. You'll be glad you did. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. I just want to make a point. I want to tie a thread through that because I think what you're saying is really important. And what I'm hearing, and I want to lift to the surface and point a light on, is it's about being intentional. So it's about picking something that you're good at and then really being strategic and intentional about cultivating a skill set in that environment that you're good at. And that can apply to any major. You're using chemistry as the example, but it can really apply to any field, any major. One of the mistakes I see students making, and part of our work here on Collegehood, is that you see students picking fields that are disconnected from their natural talents, gifts, and interests because someone told them they should, or they feel that that's safe, or they feel that that's lucrative. But if you aren't passionate and can't be strategic and engage, then you're not going to be successful. So I think a big part of what you're saying is that you make that decision up front so that then you can utilize the experience to make the most of the experience and also to be able to fill in the content you need to be marketable once you get out, to have the skill set regardless of what field you're in.
Well, that's a good point. You don't want somebody to say, well, I became a doctor because my father wanted a doctor and he wanted me
Right.
to be a doctor and I hate it and I'm not good at it. You want to do something that you are enthusiastic about, that gives you verve, just really gives you the enthusiasm that you will project the rest of your life. And when you do that, you'll do better. You'll be better for your organization and yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good point of view. Get advice from others, but make your own decision.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
it's
you
not
get
all
input.
right. It's not all about money.
It's not. And also how well you thrive and your ability to be successful is connected to your engagement and your enthusiasm. And that's going to come through in an interview because someone out there likes it. Someone out there you're competing against is excited, and that's going to show up.
This might be the time for you to tell you about the chemistry major I had, which is why I picked that. I was teaching international business. A lot of students took it as a free elective in the college. And I had a student, his last semester of his senior year, he's getting ready to graduate. He walked into my course. And I liked having him in there because I used a lot of case studies that were based on my chemical industry experience. And it was kind of fun to have a chem major in the course. He came up to me at the end of the semester and he said, I had no idea that I could do some of the things you did in chemicals. He said, I just thought I had to get a PhD, go to the lab, and that was where I'm going. And all of a sudden I'm still, no, I could be in sales, I could be in business development, I could be in procurement. There's so many things I can do.
Mm-hmm.
Had he realized that a couple of years earlier, he could have taken electives in business law, international trade, that really would have supported that career choice. So it was kind of a sad situation in the sense that he came to that conclusion late in the game.
Mm-hmm.
But it says something about the importance of the dialogue between the student, the faculty, the student, and the career services to make that proper decision as early as possible.
Sure. And I think what also you're hearing is that these things aren't linear. There's many possibilities, and you may engage in multiple opportunities over the course of your life and career as well.
That's right. When I graduated from college, as a chemistry major, I taught in high school chemistry for 2 years. I just kind of always wanted to do that. And then I decided to go to work for FMC Corporation. I thought if I'm going to raise a family, I should make some more money. Back in those days, teachers didn't make too much. Some would say they don't today, I guess. But at any rate, I went back into industry. And I didn't know I'd have a 30-year career. But it took me into sales. It took me into marketing. It took me into manufacturing, information technology, procurement. It took me around the world in all those functions. And I got a master's and MBA along the way. And then when I retired from FMC, I had the credential to teach at a college. And I did that for 13 years. So when you start off, you don't know where you're going.
Yeah.
You get in the river and you swim with it. You just want to get into the right river. You want to be going in the right direction. And then you can branch out as life takes you one place or another. So.
Yes, I think so too. Well, let's move over to the other part of that point,
Sure.
which is the skills development piece. So there's being strategic about how you're engaging in the education itself and the opportunities it presents. But then there's some important skills development that you want to do along the way.
And I'll start off and this is in the first part of the introduction to my book. I'll start off with an example. I know a woman whose son was going into his final year at a very well-known Northeastern university. And he was majoring in English. And he really wanted to go and write for the New York Times, I think. And, that was kind of his. And she said to me, she knew I was working on this book. She said, I don't think he's got a good view of where he wants to go. And I'd like him to talk to you and get your thoughts. So I said, yeah, I'd be happy to do so. So he was home on Christmas break. We set a time to get together at the local Starbucks on a Monday morning at 8:30. The night before, I spent a couple hours framing out some thoughts, some notes for this young man as to how he might pursue graduate work while he's working somewhere else. The likelihood that he wasn't going to write for the New York Times right out of college, there's other ways to do this. Anyway, I spent a couple hours on it. So our meeting was at 8:30 at Starbucks in January. I was there at 8:10, had my coffee, had my notes ready to go. At 8:35, I get a text from him that says he's running a little late. He'll be there in about 15 minutes. So anyway, this young man shows up. No resume, no CV, no notes, no nothing. He walks in and sits down. And we have a discussion, and he doesn't have a clue what he wants to do. He was soaking up my information like a sponge. I gave him the notes at the end, and off he went. And that's the last I ever heard from him. No thank you, no email, no nothing. In fact, I never heard from his mother either. I think about it. But so he did everything you're not supposed to do. He was late. He didn't follow up with a thank you note. He wasn't prepared for our meeting, our discussion. So these are the skills that you really have to develop in college because it's going to take you to the next level. So what I encourage students to do is be on time, be prepared for class, read ahead, think about what you don't understand so you can ask penetrating questions, be respectful of your peers and your faculty, dress appropriately. Now, I'm not asking you to wear a coat and tie, but it is college, but you want to dress in a way that shows respect for your classmates and for the faculty. You want to use language that's appropriate, and you want to start to take it from the schoolyard to the professional level in terms of your language, your choice of words, how you speak, how you articulate. You want to think that you are in a professional setting, and you want to be prepared. What I always say is for what might happen today, not what you think will happen. As an example, I taught in a small college. The president of the college, John Strasburger, was very engaged with the student body. He knew everybody. And it was not uncommon for him at all to grab 3 or 4 students at random, bring them to his office to meet with visiting alumni, potential donors, potential new student families, community leaders, whatever, to talk about the Ursinus College experience. And I always said to the students, if he came and got you and said, come down to my office right now, do you feel you would be dressed appropriately to meet with these visitors? So and in business, you just don't know what's going to happen. So you just have to prepare for what might be coming. So in terms of dress, I kid my wife. I said, we go to these things over the years. I said, I have sometimes in my life felt underdressed, but I have never, ever felt overdressed. So you just have to kind of follow that. But being ahead of the curve is important. If you're playing catch up all the time, whether it's in school or in the business world, on tasks you have, on research you need to do, on presentations you need to offer, you really need to be ahead of the curve. You need to be thinking about where you're going. You need to have a draft. You need to sit down with your boss, your professor, and say, here's where I'm going with this paper. Here's what it's shaping up to be. Here's the research I've done. My conclusions are starting to emerge. What do you think? And you'll get invaluable feedback. And that will make your final presentation in class or at the workplace that much better. So it's just a question of having those skill sets well honed, how you think, how you act, how you're on time, you're respectful of other people's time, how you dress, all of that. And I might just use a example, and I have several anecdotes in the book because I think it makes it more readable. When I was a sophomore in high school, our English teacher assigned us in groups of 2 to interview somebody of note in the community. Well, I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware. DuPont was king. And so my buddy Joe and I decided we would interview Irene DuPont, who was the vice chairman of the DuPont company. So I called the company to try to get an appointment, and I couldn't find my way through the maze of telephone operators. So that night at home, I opened up the phone book, and he was listed, his house. And so I called, and his wife answered, and she could tell I was just a kid. And I said, well, I'm looking for Mr. DuPont because we were looking for somebody to interview. And she said, okay, well, I'll get him. He got on the phone, and I could hear him riffling his calendar. Back then, it was all paper calendars. And he said, well, I'd be happy to meet with you boys. He said, when would you like to do it? And I said, well, we're off on Washington's birthday. Would that be okay? And he said, well, yeah, we could do that. What time would be good for you? And I said, well, at 10 o'clock. He said, sure, we can make that happen. I could tell he was moving things around to make room for us, but he did. And we walked in there, and he could not have been more gracious to 2 16-year-old kids who just wanted to interview him for the school paper. And at the end of and he gave us a full hour. And at the end of it, he took us into his private chemistry lab, and he showed us what they were going to announce in the press that afternoon, which was a invention of a new polymer, Teflon. And he said, you boys have the scoop. You knew this before the rest of the world by like 2 hours. So that's the kind of person I think we all should aspire to be. Mm-hmm. He was an important guy. He was a busy guy, and he took time and not everybody would do that. Believe me, he was a real gentleman. And I think in terms of showing respect for people, that's the kind of people we want to develop into. And it starts the first day in college.
Yeah, it does. And I think it's about one of the pieces of advice I like to give is, and you've heard me say this before on the show, is, start behaving like the person you plan to become. Every step in the direction away from your goals moves you further away from your goals. And oftentimes young people tend to take a lot of steps in the direction away from their goals, even though
Right.
their worries are about reaching their goals. And so I think being mindful about that, being intentional about how you want to show up and who you want to be and what you want to get out of the massive investment, both financially, but also hard work and time that the college experience is, I think is really important. And sometimes we enter it very passively and we don't take advantage of those opportunities. And we also don't show up how we truly want to be. And it's a real missed opportunity. We
Right.
have some
Right.
resources too, in addition to your book, but there's a couple episodes. We have an episode on informational interviewing, which is some strategies for calling folks and asking them questions about their industry. I'll link to that in the show notes, as well as linking to Victor's book and a few other episodes that I think can be really helpful about communicating with professors, about managing your time and showing up in professional dress and why that's important. There's some research behind that. Actually boosts your performance, it boosts your confidence, it boosts your ability to think creatively and critically. And so I'll link to those episodes as well, because there's a lot
That'd
of
be great.
information that's supporting a lot of the advice that you're giving out there.
Right.
Um, let's take a minute to talk a little bit about why it's so important to build these skills, maybe some missteps you've seen students make who didn't build these skills, and why you're sharing this information now.
Right. Well, the one mistake, well, it's just the common mistake, is the students get to their senior year, the fall semester of their senior year, and then they hit the panic button on, well, who am I going to talk to? Where can I get a job? That's when they
Mhm.
go to career services for the first time. That's when they start really getting very uptight about the whole thing.
Mhm.
The mistake they made is, if they had started back that second, third year, they got their major, fine. Second, third year, I want to go into pharmaceutical sales or pharmaceutical business development. I want to help people through the medical opportunities. And then what they really need to do is to kind of like think through all of the companies that are active in that field. Go to their websites. You've decided among all the possible uses for your chemistry degree, what you want: sales, marketing, you want research, et cetera. You go through that. Then you do the next cut, which is to look at specific organizations that offer jobs in that field. And you get to think about how they operate, what their value system is, how large they are,
Mhm.
how well people like working there. It's all available on the internet pretty much. And then you select your work study experiences to support that, or maybe even a study abroad. So then when you send your resume in, and I have to say, every resume looks pretty much the same as everybody else's. I went to college, I took these courses.
Mhm.
They're a little different, but basically that's the way they are. It's the cover letter that makes the big difference. And the cover letter says, I decided my freshman year I wanted to be a science major because of X. I decided in my second and third year I wanted a career in the pharmaceutical industry, and here are the reasons for that. I've elected using my electives to support that. I use my work study to support it, my study abroad. Everything I've done for 4 years, the last 3 and into the 4th year, is aimed at this. I've looked at all the organizations that would be available to me, hopefully, and I've selected yours for the following reasons. You're the one I would like to start a career with, not get a job, start a career. And that cover note is very powerful. And that sets your resume apart from everybody else's, because believe me, not everybody does what I just suggested.
Mhm.
Um, and then I would send that cover letter. I mean, you can send it into the HR department, but also find out somebody the higher ranking in that organization, whether a friend knows them or you see them on the website, and email him or her that cover letter and that resume and say, I know you're not the person that hires new college graduates, but I'm hoping you could forward this to the person who does. And then when that person in recruiting gets an email from the executive vice president regarding your resume, that person in recruiting is going to pay attention to that. I'm just telling you, that's going to happen. So it's a way of kind of cutting through the clutter, but you got to plan it. You got to be ready to do that at the beginning of your senior year and have a good story that says, I've done all this leading up here, and this is why I've done it. So the climax is getting in to talk to you and starting my career.
Yeah. There's a book called The Third Door. Have you heard of this book?
I have, yes.
Yeah, and I'm hearing this theme throughout your conversation is that you have to have a little tenacity. You have to show up and your shiniest best self, and you have to get out there and you have to make effort and you have to talk to people and you have to have tenacity. I don't have a better word for it, but you have to have tenacity. You can't passively sort of go through the motions and get on the conveyor belt. You have to make space for yourself in the world.
And what I'd like to do is the last line of my book, work hard, enjoy life, the journey is marvelous. And it really is. This is a very exciting time. I wish I could turn back the clock, believe me, about 50 years and start again, because I have enjoyed it so much. And I just wish that for all the students, as they get to college, you just start think forward. And the parties are nice, the football games are nice, that's all great. But that's not the primary reason you're there. You're there to kind of get things launched, build a career, probably build a family, and help others along the way.
Yeah. Where can listeners connect with you and get a cobby of your book?
Okay, I'm glad you asked.
That's what I'm here for, Victor.
Right. Oh, by the way, I go to my website. It's victorbrown.net, not .com, .net, victorbrown.net. And I would advise every college student who's watching this podcast or reading my book, go ahead and get your own domain name. Maybe your name is Joseph Antelope. I don't know, but go out on the domain, GoDaddy, the other ones that offer that, and get a domain. You don't have to build a website yet, but I went out and I got Victor Brown. VictorBrown.com was taken. So I went to VictorBrown.net. It was available. It costs like $10 a year to own that domain. And you can build a website on that later. So I would advise students just to do that. But at any rate, you go to VictorBrown.net. You'll read all about me, my background, what I do, and the things I've written, as well as this book. I'll hold it up here. Welcome to College. Your career starts now. It's not a big book. It's about 100 pages. Everybody's time is valuable, and I wanted to make it very conversational, get as much practical advice as I could in there. And it's available everywhere. It's available in paperback, like this, and it's available as an ebook. And you can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all the regular places that sell books. If you think Jeff Bezos has made enough money at Amazon, and you'd like to funnel some of the purchase dollars to the writer community, you go to my publisher, bookbaby.com, bookbaby.com, and you can order directly from there, either print or ebook. So it's self-published. It's kind of a thing that I just wanted to do and leave behind. I think the topic is good for some time to come. And I appreciate the opportunity just through word of mouth to let people know about the book. And hopefully they find it as enjoyable to read as I found it enjoyable to write.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground, but I want to give space if there's anything we missed or last pieces of advice you'd like to share before we sign off today.
I would say that you want to resist a little bit of and how do I say this delicately? Some colleges don't like all the advice I have in the book. They don't like the fact I encourage students to pick their major after their first year. They'd rather you wait till your second year. Well, what happens is students by the time they figure out what they really want to do, they don't have enough electives to get the prerequisites, and all of a sudden they are looking at a fifth year. Colleges love that. They'll be happy to have you for a fifth year. So what I would say, avoid the siren song of the institution. There's a great many people at the institutions, the faculty, the staff, the career services people. They are wonderful. They're very helpful. Institutionally, the college would prefer that people stick around longer than I think they need to. And with the cost of college being what it is, I just think it's important to move along and to make these decisions sooner rather than later. In the long run, it'll save you money and it'll get you out in the workforce that much sooner. So that's a little bit delicate, but that's the reality of it.
We challenge we challenge some of the institutional conventions here often. My background is working in higher ed. I've taught, I've advised, run a student success center as an associate director, and I'm out here so that I can give unbiased information because our institutions want you to succeed, but sometimes the advice that they're giving you is to keep you at the institution, to graduate you in a certain amount of time to meet their metrics. And so
Right.
part of getting advice from your advisors and the resources on your campus is amazingly important. And we promote that all the time here. I think also getting information from people who are more objective can be really beneficial as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. I've enjoyed our discussion, and I trust that your listeners and viewers will do as well.
Thanks so much for joining us today, Victor. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing all of this great advice.